Welcome everybody to Studio 8.1, the one-stop shop for all things Telemedia, where I, the publisher of Telemedia magazine, speak to the editor, Paul Skeldon, about the most interesting topics that have come across our desk in the last 2 weeks. This week, we are going to be talking about AI-powered cyber attacks and how they are on the rise. No surprises there. Also, however, DCB security and compliance is starting to really get somewhere. And of course, as always, business messaging is booming thanks to RCS, but that is to be discussed a little later. So, hi, Paul. Thanks for joining me.
Hello, mate. Good to
Uh,
have, but good to be here. Thank you for having me, as ever.
Good, good. Right. So, without further ado, we will go on to the first section. And we're going to talk about how 91% of online merchants fear AI powered cyber attacks, and two-thirds have already reported that they have become victims of said attacks. Now, online merchants of all time, of all sizes, from the largest e-commerce companies to the smallest of telemedia service providers, are now seeking or now seeing increased AI powered cyber attacks. So the question is, Paul, what is the answer, and who has given us the answer?
Well, if only we had the answer. But I think that this is an interesting report that came out from a company called Ravelin, who do all things cyber security, and they've looked at, I think, e-commerce in general, but they've broken it down into sort of retailers and digital goods merchants and marketplaces, and sort of looked at how they're being impacted by fraud and where that fraud's coming from, and tried to posit some answers. But the headline thing is that, like you say, 91% of these sort of merchants are worried about AI cyber attacks. Two-thirds of them, they've already been victim of them, and it's quite a significant problem. And the thing is, like with fraud, it's always been a sort of, they come up with new ways of doing fraud, then the industry combats it, and so we move. But the rate of change is getting quicker and quicker because they're using AI. The criminals are using AI, and it's a huge problem. In fact, sort of looking at the Raveling data in more detail for the digital goods segment alone, 71% of them are being attacked already that they know of by AI, or fraud that's perpetrated in some way with AI powering it, which is huge. I mean, most of it is to do with payment fraud, and it's costing billions of dollars. In fact, sort of in the research, looking at all of the companies they talk to, um, something like sort of 20% of them reckon they lose at least $15 million a year to fraud. It's extraordinary. I mean, that's obviously includes a lot of very big companies, but I think that's a lot of money to lose. And I think all businesses of all sizes that are trying to sell digital things online are losing money. Interestingly, some of the other research into this is that the cost isn't just revenue loss. It's also sort of like one of the sort of biggest things that companies are most worried about. In fact, 45% of them is brand image damage, and the effect that then has on customer loyalty and customer sign-ups and all that kind of thing. And even about a quarter of them are all also worried about the impact it has on internal staff morale. So the impact of this is enormous across all these businesses. And I think it is something that those that operate in the telemedia world do also experience. And I think anybody selling anything online is going to be a victim of this. But it's a huge problem, and the costs are much bigger than just the money. It's a very interesting report, really well worth downloading. The link will appear. The link to the story we covered it in, which has the report link in it, will appear on the screen magically. But download it. It's an excellent, really fascinating report. A really, really good read.
Yeah, no, Revelin are a very interesting company, fraud prevention, payment optimization platform. And I think the point you make about, the point you make is important that, there are lots of other costs associated with fraud. I think when fraud prevention and compliance and all of those things were introduced to the telemedia industry, it was seen as an additional layer of costs and something which reduced engagement levels but in fact, it's really about striking a balance between protecting your business and the customer experience, and getting that balance is really important. And companies like Ravelin, Avena, MCP, I mean, are very much aware of that. And companies within the telemedia industry, having been involved in this area for such a long time, do understand that fraud prevention and compliance is not simply a cost. It's really about protecting
Mm,
revenues. I think one of the other important things to remember is that whilst we often talk about, AI driven, organized gang, dark web type serious frauds, there is also now elements of the industry, particularly with digital goods, which hark back to, the good old days of premium rate, where you're actually getting customers being squeezed by the cost of living, who are almost kind of starting to create another level, which is the sort of, if you can call it, petty fraud. And therefore it's also, you get your chargeback issues still occurring, and it's also very important from a merchant to understand and identify good customers versus, those bad customers. And obviously, when you've got a good base of customers, you can breed or generate customer loyalty, which obviously creates more long-term revenues and a better customer base. So, it's not just the big, sort of cyber attacks that people are suffering with at the moment. It is also now, those sort of young tech savvy consumers who don't have as much money in their
mm,
pockets as perhaps they thought they had, and they can see ways through that. So these kinds of systems and these kinds of companies are absolutely essential for protecting telemedia revenues, reputation, and helping us drive our business forward. And I'm glad to say, I think also, if you look at the Revelin website, it isn't all bad news, because whilst AI is being introduced and deployed, for nefarious reasons, equally companies like Revelin, MCP, Avena are using the same kinds of tools to combat it. And in some ways, there's an optimistic view that in fact the two probably, can in fact cancel each other out, and that, there is a solution to this.
mm.
And they are, you would expect extremely positive. But I think we're going to hear more from them, and certainly over the coming year, if you attend any of the telemedia events, you are going to hear a lot more from, as I say, the Impellos of this world, the MCPs, the Avenas, and all the other great compliance and fraud prevention companies that support our industry so well. If you want to hear more about the developing area, or this developing area, and news stories relating to fraud prevention, please do remember to like, subscribe, or comment if you're watching this on YouTube. Right, let's get on to our second topic, which is certainly related to anti-fraud, but a little bit more orientated towards security and compliance. And I'm very happy to report, Paul, that as a result of coming back from the recent 8.1 Live event in Barcelona, we were very lucky to grab a few minutes with Kevin Dawson, who's one of the directors at MCP Insights, who had some very interesting things to say about compliance.
He did indeed.
Yeah. So, what do you think about what Kevin had to say in Barcelona, Paul?
Well, as Kevin says, it's interesting how the industry, the telemedia industry particularly, has shifted to being much more focused on compliance. I mean, let's face it, back in the old days, it wasn't sort of high up on the list of priorities of many companies, and a lot of it was done sort of maybe just because they had to, and often at the last minute. Whereas now, as he says, the industry is much more focused on being more sustainable and having longevity, and is applying sort of compliance and risk management across the entire value chain. So we're seeing more and more sort of companies springing up who do that for telemedia providers. But I think also it's making the industry a much safer and more interesting place. As we've seen, there's a large rise in worry about fraud. And I think we're seeing that, funnily enough, the telemedia industry is one of those sort of sectors in the digital goods market that's actually ahead of the game to some degree. I mean, I think you can't ever really keep ahead of the fraudsters. They're always sort of one step ahead, but the telemedia industry is very much there with keeping up with it. And we have a lot of companies really deeply focused on getting this right. And I think some of the mistakes of the past have now made this a much better industry. And the sort of carrier billing compliance is there as new markets sort of develop, particularly in the Middle East and North Africa. The sort of compliance side and understanding the sort of flow of how the content is sold, how the carrier billing works, trying to mitigate and overcome fraud or cut out where it could occur in the first place. It is really sort of front and center. You made some interesting comments, I think, really about the sustainable view that people now have of this industry. It's not just a quick buck out of like the latest content trend, like the ringtones back in the day and all that kind of thing. It's much more about building a long-term, sustainable, secure business. And I think it might well be one of those industries that other sort of online merchant sectors could take a look at and sort of say, well, this is how this sector has tackled this problem. Maybe there's some ideas here as to how we can do this, which is all relevant in an era where fraud is just growing and growing, particularly when it's powered by AI.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I thought one of the other interesting things that he pointed out was that I remember back in, again, 20 years ago in our sort of commercial marketing material, when we were talking about the telemedia industry, we would often use and reference the ever-changing media landscape, thinking back then that, the internet was it, that was the change. But of course, Kevin makes a very interesting point that nowadays, anywhere that there are eyeballs will be rightfully a target now for advertisers and merchants to promote digital telemedia value-added services, which, when you think about it, makes the task and the service that these companies and the technology that these companies have developed, it really baffling. It's extraordinary that the number of different areas that they are now able to monitor and as I say, therefore protect and make sure that compliant advertising and scams are, being picked up
Mm,
early doors, because it is absolutely vast. And in fact, on that note, I think it's telling, really, that when we look at developing the conference plan for World Telemedia in Dubai, which is coming up on the 11th to the 13th of May, and also Marbella in October, if you look at the kinds of things that the industry want to talk about at the telemedia event now, more and more and more of it is about, understandably, how you acquire those customers, but the broad range of various sites and mechanisms and ways of attracting eyeballs is just expanding. And it wasn't that long ago Google was the only show in town, and now it's absolutely
mm,
everything. So that also means, and I think Kevin makes that point quite well, that whilst that means it's a big old task for companies like Kevin's, it also means that the telemedia industry has got an ever expanding and growing media landscape in which to acquire an ever larger number of customers, which is why I think we're seeing such some exciting numbers coming out of the market, and we're seeing some real success stories across the board as value-added services become ever more important to those tech-savvy, high-tech, on-the-move consumers being serviced so brilliantly by telemedia providers across the globe. Yeah, if you're interested, anyone out there in selling your digital services effectively and compliantly and getting the maximum engagement across the board, then you need to be at one of those World Telemedia events. And I'm sure that you will find the links somewhere below us or above us in this, wherever you happen to be watching this video. I think it's also, as a footnote to this, worth pointing out, seeing as Kevin gave us his time in Barcelona, that there was an interesting press release from MCP on the 8th of January, which you can reread, which goes into a little bit more detail about how they launched, as I say, only in January, an upgraded version 4 of their campaign and billing flow monitoring tool, the MCP scanner. which is obviously doing great things for a number of telemedia companies in the in our world, in our universe. But talking of compliance campaign management and all that sort of stuff. Avena have got some amazing news that just came out with regards to a deal that they've done with Ooredoo, who are enormous in the sort of MENA and Southeast Asia area. And they've done some work for them, and they've done a deal with them to make sure the DCB is even cleaner. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it was just a sort of, I thought, sort of in light of the things that Kevin was saying, it was worth just flagging this up that Avena are working with Ooredoo um, to just add Avena's AI-powered fraud prevention technology to its carrier billing offering. I think it's just a nice and timely example of how the industry is embracing this. As Kevin says, it's across the value chain. It's from the operators all the way down. And here we have an example of that in action with our friends at Avena. They too, like everybody, has to keep on top of AI, and they build AI into their offering. It gets ever more sophisticated to combat the ever more sophisticated AI frauds that are out there. Yeah, it's just a lovely example, I think, that came along sort of moments pretty much after Kevin's sort of points he made at 8.1 that of it in action. It just shows that they do take this very seriously, and there's some really excellent solutions out there. I mean, fraud's a huge challenge, particularly for the payments industry, but also for the MVAS, the wider MVAS community. And I think this really shows, particularly in the MENA region, how they're really taking the bull by the horns and going for it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, if you want to understand the sort of sheer scale and importance of this deal, um, or Rudu are the number that were the first operator actually to launch the 5G network, which I was not aware of. They did, of course, used to be QTEL out of Qatar, and they've since become one of the largest comms companies in the world with over 114 million customers across MENA and Asia. So they really are an enormous business. So I think, huge congratulations to our friends at Avena, who we're very proud to say have been a platinum sponsor of World Telemedia for a very long time now. So for them to have secured this deal with a giant of the comms industry like Urudu, I think is fantastic. Urudu, for those that don't know, means I want in Arabic, and so I guess that's telling, because I guess Avena are now gonna want even more of those kind of deals coming their way. But yeah, payment security is obviously important to an enormous company like that. It's really fantastic that a company that's so close to the telemedia industry like Avena has, beaten off all the competition and secured that deal. So congratulations to them. But also, again, if you're in the VAS industry and you want to make sure that you're compliant, that you're anti-fraud, that you're safe, then there are plenty of very excellent providers at World Telemedia that can talk you through how to keep your business protected and keep those revenues protected and keep those good customers happy. Again, just a quick reminder, if you would like to get regular updates from us, please do remember to like, subscribe, and give us a comment. We'd like to hear from you. Right, Paul, let's go on to the third area, which is one of our favorites. Oh, well, it's one of your favorites, business messaging. The word on the street is that it's booming again. I think we might have actually mentioned this last week. RCS and OTT, of course, are on the up. Business is booming. And there's been some data come out from our old friends at Infobip that shows that RCS is finally kicking into action with businesses, whilst OTT is also doing rather well. Not least WhatsApp, thanks to changes in how it's priced. Now, it does feel a little bit like Groundhog Day, because I think almost word for word, I might have said this 2, or if not 4 weeks ago. But this is fresh data, and I do feel that, I'm starting to believe.
Mm. Well, absolutely, because we have, and we are on video saying how RCS was failing to grow and really taken off. So, thanks Infobip for making us look humbled at the very least, if not maybe perhaps a little silly. But yes, Infobip obviously has looked at the data as to how people are using its services and concluded that RCS is now finally starting to really gain some proper traction amongst business users. So adoption of it has skyrocketed. It's increased by 14 times in the US. It's gone up by about seven and a bit times, I think, globally. So it's a big increase. Businesses are finally starting to use it, which is great. And very timely because the sort of other set of data that we have from our friends at Juniper is that OTT business messaging is also exploding in use at the same time. So I think what this tells us is that businesses are starting to really now see rich messaging, so things that appear on your mobile phone, a bit like text, as a really legitimate and useful way to reach consumers. And I think it's starting to reach that tipping point where this is going to become the primary way in which businesses interact with consumers. It's going to be, it's already a sort of fairly healthy marketing channel. I think it's going to become the sort of premier sort of mobile marketing channel. Obviously, RCS and OTT messaging like WhatsApp are sort of in competition with one another. But I think the fact that there is that competition only drives this up. And I suspect what happens is that bigger businesses, certainly with bigger budgets, will spend on doing both OTT and RCS campaigns, which can only be good, can't it, really?
Absolutely. It's worth pointing out again at the on wherever you're watching our vodcast that there are links to the Infobit report messaging trends, and there is also a free download available from Juniper Research from their report, Global OTT Business Messaging Market 2024 to 2029, which I think we referenced a couple of episodes ago. I mean, one of the drivers that was mentioned for WhatsApp's success is the changing business model. And I don't think we went into a lot of detail on this last time it was mentioned, but I think the sort of assumption was basically it's going to be simpler, it's going to be cheaper, and everyone's gonna get it and be even more inclined to use it. But it's not quite that simple, is it?
No, no, and well,
Please
Infobip
comment.
well, yes, yes. Well, this is where I want sort of the experts out there watching this to wade in because clearly we must understand how messaging is priced. So I thought I'd do a little bit of googling just to see well what has changed with WhatsApp's pricing model and how is this better? And I must admit I'm now more confused than I was before I started. So I did know that WhatsApp charged per 24-hour period for a conversation, but it seems that that's not quite what they do. Um, and what they do charge depends on the type of customer you are, the type of person you're reaching, the region you're in, and what kind of conversation it is. So trying to find a price for how you do that with WhatsApp is really difficult. So you think, well, clearly this must be where RCS is gaining all its extra business. It must be more straightforward. And it is, but it's still quite hard to find out how much it actually costs because it costs one rate to send the initial message, and then any sort of reply becomes charged at a smaller conversational rate for 24 hours. Now,
And
what
we
those
reckon
rates
that's
are,
because of volume, right? We reckon that's
I
because there's a
think it's
volume
volume,
to kick in
absolutely.
then.
And I think that it all depends on, again, what company it is, who you're trying to reach, what kind of marketing message, and what region you're in. So I kind of looked at this as if I was a humble business trying to think I'm going to use OTT or RCS as a marketing tool. I wonder how much it's going to cost. I don't know, is the answer, which I think is an issue that needs to be addressed. Now, as you say, please do comment because we might be missing something here. You and I, we're not as expert in the intricacies of message pricing as we'd like to be. It's certainly something I'm going to delve into more in more detail. But yes, it does appear to be so confusing and so hard to fathom that I do wonder whether this might be part of the reason why it's certainly RCS hasn't taken off to the extent that maybe we might have hoped it has.
Yeah.
WhatsApp does seem to be going gangbusters, but I think that's because during the pandemic, it became an easy way to communicate with consumers, and businesses were desperate enough to pretty much pay whatever it costs to do that. Uh, I think now the market is more competitive with RCS taking on OTT messaging and vice versa. Maybe that will change. But yes, I'm confused about what the pricing thing actually is, how it works, what it costs, and would love to know more. So if anybody can enlighten me, please do.
Please do in the comments below. Just going back to RCS, as you know, well, firstly, we do have some friends over at Kaleido Intelligence who are now in bed with Mobile Squared. I don't know whether they've become Mobile Kaleido or whatever, but we'll ask and see if we can get some clarification on that for the next episode. What is sort of slightly frustrating, I think, is that one of the headline with regards to ICS is that it's surged by 500% in a year as businesses start to see the potential and the price starts to look right. Again, I feel like those percentages are a little bit misleading because, of course,
Hmm.
if you're going from quite a low level, 500%, it is relatively easy to achieve. So I'm not necessarily sure that that's a great endorsement of RCS. But what I would say from sort of my anecdotal evidence is that, when we were starting to talk about RCS surging 3 years ago, and I made the point the only Android user in the telemedia industry, I think, that, I'd yet to receive one. And of course, I've still only received a couple. But interestingly, the companies that have been sending me RCSs have not been massive brands. They've not been the big supermarkets. They've not been the big retailers. They've been my local picture house, which are using
Yeah.
RCS to send out their tickets, which is very handy. And also some of the Airbnb hosts are starting to use that with whichever particular Airbnb
Hmm.
or whichever sort of check-in platform they happen to be using because it works extremely well for that as well. With app downloads and all those kinds of things, it's kind of built into the message. So, I can honestly say it is working, and when you receive one, the experience is great. And I think that that's just me talk. That's my actual experience, but. If you listen to even Ostovich, for the chief business officer at Infobit, he says RC is taking off because it works, which is actually really the most important thing. That's the key. It's got to be intuitive. It does work, and he goes on to say that the branded and verified experience reduces hesitation from the users, which I can attest is true. With its rich visuals, it captures the attention and drives engagement. So yeah, I mean, I can honestly say that my experience of using RCS when I've received one has been great, and whilst I'm sort of being a little bit skeptical about some of these enormous percentage growth figures, I really do feel that this could kick on. And
Hmm.
so we'll see the war between RCS and OTT continues. We will obviously continue to follow that. So please do remember to like, subscribe, and comment, and you'll receive an update on a couple bi-monthly basis. So
Well,
listen,
we'll get you on if you have some really good comments.
or we'll get you on. Yeah, if
We'll
anyone,
get you on, and you can tell the world.
especially on that pricing one. So listen, thank you everyone for listening. Paul, thanks for joining me. I'll see you in a couple of weeks' time with more hot off the press telemedia news, everything to do with value-added services, selling premium content, how people pay for it, how you're going to engage those customers, and how you're going to keep those customers coming back for more. So until next time, goodbye.
Goodbye.